What's up, boys? Um, just want to double check to make sure everything is all set up. Sorry, just bear with me for a second.
Sure, everything
Yep,
is.
everything's perfect. All right. So, UFC 314 just came and gone, and we're going to matchmake in this little live stream that we got. But before we go into matchmaking, I just want to say something about the UFC 314 card because it was tremendous. I had a couple of predictions going into the fight. I thought Gene Silva would dominate. He did. I thought Michael Chandler would find the KO. He didn't. I was extremely wrong on the Paddy Pimblett fight. Um, Chandler definitely did look washed. What's up, my boy? Chandler definitely did look washed, but at the same time, I will give Patty his credit. Patty definitely did look a lot better than I thought. I still am not completely convinced that that Patty is top tier level. I do think he loses to most of the guys in the top five. Honestly, maybe all of the guys in the top five. But with that being said, um, I definitely do think that that Patty proved himself a little bit. He's definitely better than I expected. And yeah. Reyes versus Jan, that would be a tremendous fight. I wouldn't mind if they put that together. Reyes is on honestly a tremendous run. 3-0 in his last three, all finishes. There's a lot of really good and exciting fights that could come up for him, and maybe he eventually does get to that title shot. Patty versus Gaethje in October in Abu Dhabi, that would also be a really good fight. I know Patty was calling out Gaethje. I don't mind that fight whatsoever. I honestly would favor Gaethje in that fight, but with that being said, if the fight does get to the ground, it's over. Gaethje doesn't know what he's doing on the ground. Patty has tremendous jiu-jitsu, and it'll be difficult to get it there. Gaethje does have really good takedown defense, and Patty doesn't have the best wrestling. But if it does get to the ground, the fight's over. Lopez Rodriguez, yes, I completely agree with that one. They have to make that for Guadalajara in September, I believe. That's the card you're talking about. That has to happen. 5-round co-main event. If it's a pay-per-view, if it's a fight night, that's a 5-round main event right there. I think it's a shoe-in and definitely should happen. Um, yeah, Patty's stand-up definitely is coming along. You're definitely right. This was the best he looked on the feet for sure. But yeah, I mean, obviously he could improve even further from this last fight against Chandler. We'll see how he looks against potential Gaethje or anybody else that he maybe will go up against. But yeah, so 314 was tremendous. Volk getting the belt, breaking the over 35 curse for fighters under 155 pounds was tremendous. He put on a great performance. Yes, Lopez definitely did have a few moments. He hurt him in the second round, dropped him. He also hurt him in the fourth round, I believe it was. But outside of that, it was all Alexander Volkanovski. And going into the fight, honestly, that's exactly what I thought. Um, I thought Volkanovski would look tremendous. I thought he was a significantly better fighter than Lopez, although Lopez was very dangerous. So I thought Lopez could have his moments. He could find a finish, but if that didn't come about, I thought Volk would dominate and just outsmart Diego, which turned out to be honestly what did happen. But let's be honest, though, Chandler makes everyone look good standing. Yeah, I mean, yes. I also did think, as I said before, Chandler did look washed in this fight. I mean, yes, he has a horrible record in the UFC. There's no way of getting around that. But when you look at some of the guys he went up against, Charles Oliveira the first time, he had his moments, dropped him. Charles Oliveira the second time, he didn't look good. He definitely didn't look good. But in my opinion, I thought it was more attributed to all the time off that he had as opposed to him being washed necessarily. Now, it turned out that I think, especially at this point, we know he is washed. But with that being said, he even had a little bit of a moment in that second Oliveira fight. In the Gaethje fight, he had a moment. In the Poirier fight, I actually thought he was winning until he got choked out. And I don't know if I'm missing any fights, but obviously he beat Tony and he beat Dan Hooker. But I thought there was a lot of good performances, or not good performance, but a lot of good moments that Chandler had for sure. But yeah, Chandler looks slower than usual. I completely agree. Um, yeah, actually, I was thinking about that when I was putting this video together or thinking about what I should do. I was thinking about Gene Silva versus Sterling, But yeah, let's get started on the potential matchups. So the first matchup that I think is a shoe-in that definitely should happen is where is he? We'll do Alexander Volkanovski versus Movsar Evloev. Both of them have said they already want to make this fight. Volkanovski said it before the fight. He said it after the fight. He wants to fight Evloev relatively soon. So that's definitely a fight that should happen. Evloev does deserve a title shot at this point. I know there were some rumors about him versus Pico, but I don't think that's happening anymore. He should get a title shot. He's not the most exciting guy, but he did put a lot of wins together, and I do think this should be the next matchup. In terms of who do I think would win this matchup, I think this is honestly a tailor-made matchup for Volkanovski. At this point, Volk has still shown that he's not washed at all. He's extremely fast. His technical ability obviously is still there. His chin is even not as bad as I thought it may be. He took a lot of shots in this fight, and yes, he did get dropped once, but it was almost like a flash knockdown, and he was completely fine right away. So I do think his chin is obviously not amazing. If he takes a clean flush shot, he's probably going to go out. But with that being said, he never had a tremendous chin. So I do think he's going to beat a lot of guys that aren't all that dangerous. And I do think that Evloev fits into that category. Obviously, he has no finishes in the UFC, no finishes in his career. Or I think he does have finishes in his career, but in the UFC, no finishes. Not all that dangerous in terms of even submissions. And regardless, Volk is tremendous at stopping submissions. So I do think this is a very tailor-made fight for Volkanovski. It could look relatively close. I wouldn't be shocked, but I definitely would be leaning with Alexander Volkanovski. Yeah, featherweight's is tremendous. There's a lot of really good divisions. Um, and Pico is a great addition to featherweight. I completely agree. He's tremendous, very exciting, knockout power, good wrestler. A lot of things to like about Pico. I do think he also is going to be at the top of that featherweight division. There's just a lot of guys at 145 that are really good. There's a lot of guys at 155 that are really good. At 135, 125. There's a lot of new guys coming in and guys that are just tremendous. There's a lot of really good weight classes in the UFC and a lot of really good contenders, to be completely honest. So yeah, so that would be the first fight that is a smarter version of Chandler. Honestly, probably that I probably would agree with that. Um, but yeah, so this is the first matchup that I would say Volkanovski versus Evloev. The next matchup that I think should be made is Paddy Pimblett versus Ilia Topuria. Now, I have said this in the past, and I still do think this, that I think Ilia Topuria should fight for the belt. I do think so. Ilia versus Islam is the biggest fight you can make in the UFC, and I would like to see that happen. But with that being said, if Islam doesn't want to take that fight and the UFC wants to look in a different direction and doesn't want to give Ilia a title shot right away, I think this is a tailor-made fight. Yes, you can put Ilia against Charles Oliveira. That's a huge fight. Yes, you can put him up against Arman Tsarukyan. Not as big of a fight, but if Ilya is in the fight, it's going to be a big one. Yes, you can put him up against Gaethje or even Dustin, but although all those fights are going to be big, I do think, yeah, I mean, Ilya versus Oliveira. As I was saying, yeah, I don't mind that. But the reason why I'm going Ilya versus Patty is because it's the biggest fight. I think you do it as a main event of a fight night in Spain, perhaps. I don't know if they're going to go there. Yesterday in the press conferences, it seems like they're not going to, as Dana was saying. But I think you do this as a fight night main event. Or obviously, as I said, you could do Ilya versus Oliveira, but Oliveira has been saying that he didn't really want to fight Ilya. So there's a lot of moving parts at 155, but I think this is the fight to make at this point. I think Patty is moving up the rankings. He doesn't deserve a title shot next. Obviously, he does need to fight somebody else. They have beef. They're both at the top of their games, it would appear. Why not match them up together? Now, in this matchup, I don't think it's really all that close, to be honest, but I have been wrong on Patty a lot. But I think this is a very easy win, in my opinion, for Ilia Topuria. But we'll see. As I said, I've been wrong about Patty a bunch of times in the past. So we'll see what happens going forward for both of the fighters. Now, the next fight that I think you make, which may be a little bit of an interesting one, is Gene Silva versus Brian Ortega. I was thinking Gene Silva versus Josh Emmett, but this guy is too good. I think you really have to fast track this guy to the top of the division. Brian Ortega is, he is at the top of the division. It would be a really good fight. Let's see, where is Brian Ortega ranked? Brian Ortega is 6. So yes, I do think this would be a pretty good fight. If John Silva beats Brian Ortega, which I definitely think he will. I do think after that, you could possibly go a title shot for John Silva. Maybe you go one more fight before the title shot for John Silva. But I think the UFC clearly has something tremendous with this guy. Um, and uh, and yeah, I don't know. I just think this is probably a pretty good fight, but there's a lot of matchups for John Silva. As my boy said before, you can do John Silva versus Sterling. I don't hate that. You can do John Silva versus Josh Emmett if you want to take it a little bit slower. You can do John Silva versus, let's look through the rankings. You can even do John Silva versus Arnold Allen, Lerone Murphy. Yusuf Salal would be a fun fight, but he is the number 12 ranked guy. So there's just a lot of things you can do with Silva. And as I said before, if you follow me on Twitter, I think there's a lot of fights and a lot of guys that John Silva beats. I think this guy is definitely going to become a champion. I'm a huge fan of Volkanovski, but I think if John Silva fought Volkanovski, I think John Silva would win. Um, Let's see. Let's go through the comments. Patty versus Ilya and Charles versus Armin. Yes, I completely agree with that. That's what I would do if I was Dana White. I definitely think that makes sense. Charles versus Armin. That fight was so close the first time around. Armin deserved the title shot. You know, he pulled out whatever. He has to fight again. So why not just do Charles versus Armin once again? 5 rounds this time. The fight was too close. 3-rounder doesn't even make sense. I think you do a co-main event for a pay-per-view. Charles Armin, 5 rounds. You do Paddy Ilya, main event of a fight night card in Spain if possible. If not, maybe in the UK or wherever they'll figure it out. But that would be tremendous. I do agree with those two matchups. Pico can fight Calvin Kattar for his debut. I don't mind that at all. I wouldn't even mind if they pushed Pico a little bit further up in the rankings. I know Kattar is what? Kattar is 14. I wouldn't mind if they did, a Pico versus a Lerone Murphy. I know originally it was supposed to be Pico versus Evloev. I think Evloev probably should get a title shot against Volkanovski. I think that's what they're going to do. But yeah, I mean, a Pico versus Calvin Kattar would be a fun fight. I definitely would favor Pico in that fight. But yeah, that could definitely be an interesting one. What do we got? We got Chandler versus Pitbull. Whoever wins stays in the UFC. Yeah, sure. I listen. I think Chandler should retire at this point. He had some success against a lot of the top guys. He didn't beat a lot of the top guys, but he definitely had some success against them. But at this point, I think it's pretty clear based on his last 2 performances, he's washed. In my opinion, I think he probably should retire. Will he retire? I don't think so. I don't really know where the UFC goes from here with him. There's not really many big fights you can make with him at all. But I guess we'll see. But if I was Michael Chandler, I would probably retire at this point. UFC 317. Yeah, Dana said in the press conference after the fights yesterday that 317 should be announced pretty soon. I know that one of the one of the journalists asked him about Hamzat versus Dricus, and he said he likes the fight. I don't know if that means that's going to be the fight for UFC 317, but I guess we'll see. That would be a perfect fight. It's a huge fight. It's one of the biggest fights you can make in the UFC right now. So hopefully that does get made for UFC 317. Chandler versus Green losers. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, Chandler Green, I actually do think Chandler may win that fight. But I don't know. Outside Bobby Green, I don't think Chandler beats anybody. And for Bobby Green, I don't think he really beats anybody either. But for for his sake, for his brain's sake, I think he should also probably retire. Took a pretty bad kick, spinning wheel kick to the head in his last fight. And Chandler, even if he's washed, he still does throw bombs. So I don't know. How soon? How soon for what? 317? I'm not sure. It could be next week. It could be 2 weeks. I'm really not sure. Hopefully they announce that soon, though. I would assume it would be relatively soon. So that's good. But yeah, let's move on for some of the other matchmaking that I would personally do. This is something that we already talked about before, very obvious one. But Diego Lopez versus Yair Rodriguez. As I said, you do this as a main event for the Guadalajara card if it's a fight night, but if it's a pay-per-view, which I do think it is a pay-per-view, you do 5-round co-main event for Diego Lopez and Yair Rodriguez. The beef is there. Both of these guys are tremendous fighters. Yair put on a really good performance. Even Lopez, I mean, listen, I actually thought he performed better than I thought against Volkanovski. I Going into the fight, this is how I thought it would go. I thought Diego Lopez obviously is very dangerous. He's proven to be a very dangerous fighter in all of his fights, and I thought he would prove to be that in the first 2 rounds against Volkanovski. I thought in the first 2 rounds he could knock out Volk. I would not have been surprised whatsoever if that happened. But once the 3rd round came about, and especially the 4th and 5th rounds, I thought Volkanovski would be in the clear. I thought he would run away with it, and I thought Diego Lopez would gas. But that's not what happened. Yes, Alexander Volkanovski fought extremely well, clearly won the fight, was significantly better technically, and had a significantly better IQ in there, and essentially everything outside of power, he was better than Lopez in. But with that being said, Lopez was a little bit more technical than I thought, for one, and for two, his cardio was significantly better than I thought. At the end of the 5th round, he was still throwing, and he didn't look tired really at all, to be completely honest. So I do think this is a really good fight, Lopez and Yair. I definitely would lean with Diego Lopez for sure. I think he will win this fight. If the fight gets down to the ground, it's probably over. I think he submits him. On the feet, the kicks definitely could be dangerous, but Lopez has proven to be extremely durable. He was taking huge shots from Volk. I know Volk's not the biggest puncher, but he was really loading up on a lot of shots, landing clean, and it didn't seem like Lopez was getting hurt at all. So I do think Lopez would be able to knock out Yair on the feet, or if not, take him down and submit him. So I definitely would be leaning with Diego Lopez. Let's go through some of the comments. Reyes versus Cleal or Hill. I don't mind that at all, but I guess that's a good segue into the next thing. What I was thinking is Dominic Reyes versus forgetting my boy's name, versus Rakic. I don't know, I forgot that, but yeah, that's the matchup that I was thinking that I would put together. I definitely could see them doing Khalil, the winner of Khalil and Jamal Hill versus Dominic Reyes. I wouldn't mind that whatsoever. But yeah, I guess originally when I was making this video, that's the fight I was thinking about, Reyes versus Rakic. It would be a really good fun, really fun fight. Honestly, I am kind of leaning with the guy that's streaking. I think I would favor Dominic Reyes to beat Rakic. Although Rakic is a really good fighter, he has tremendous kicks, decent wrestling. I do think Dominic Reyes would win this fight. I think the lack of a chin for Reyes is going to be a huge factor in this fight. I think the lack of boxing is going to be a huge factor in this fight for Reyes's like for him to win. So I definitely would be leaning with Dominic Reyes. Let's go through the comments a little bit. Main event DDP Hamzat, co-main event Oliveira Taporia, Dan Hooker Moicano. Yeah, that I would not be mad at that at all. That would be really good. The only thing that I will say about that is, listen, Oliveira Taporia is a tremendous fight, but they just got to get over the leap or whatever that Oliveira seems to be waiting for a title shot against Islam. So I guess they'll have to give him a lot of money to fight Taporia, which I'm sure they'll be able to get it done. But yeah, that's a tremendous fight. I don't mind that whatsoever. Yeah, and as you said before, Reyes versus Yan, that's also a good fight. I wouldn't mind that at all. Hamza won't be able to fight in the US. I think he's all right. I heard Dana talking about it not too long ago that he'll be able to fight in the US. So I think we're going to be seeing Hamzat fight in the US in his next fight potentially, or if not, maybe he'll go somewhere else. But I think in the future, if everything lines up, I think Hamzat will be able to fight in the US. So we'll see that. Islam Gaethje, I would not be happy at all. I don't think Gaethje deserves it whatsoever. He has one win. Yes, I know he had put a couple wins together prior, but he was knocked out bad by Max Holloway, and he beat a short notice Fiziev, who I think Fiziev probably should be at 145. I think Fiziev's a great fighter, but I think he's a little bit small for 55. So yeah, I would not be happy with with Islam versus Gaethje whatsoever. I definitely don't think that should be the fight. But yeah, this is my matchmaking for after UFC 314. As I said, tremendous card, really, really tremendous card. Honestly, I heard somebody else talk about this before, and I completely agree. There was a lot of rumors, and I actually have a video coming out next week about this, that MMA is falling off, the UFC is falling off. I never thought that was true, but with that being said, there definitely were some things that weren't great about the UFC. But I feel like last night really reminded us why we became MMA fans. Yesterday was tremendous. Obviously, the main event was a great fight. Co-main event was a great fight. The name factor was there for sure. But when you look throughout this card, even from the prelims, all the fights delivered for the most part. A lot of finishes, a lot of great fights. And that's why we all fell in love with MMA. MMA, when it's at its peak, is just unmatched. There's really nothing, in my opinion at least, that's even comparable to it. MMA is just tremendous, and yesterday really proved that. I think the UFC really needs to stack their cards once again, like they did yesterday for UFC 314, for a lot of other cards as well, and they'll continue to grow. I mean, it was a tremendous card. It's very hard for people to watch that card and not like it, or not become MMA fans from that, and I definitely do think the UFC should definitely go in this direction. And when you look at some of the cards they're putting together, I do think they actually are doing a better job. With the UFC Macau card, looks pretty good, which is a fight night. Some of the other fight night cards that they have coming up, a lot of them are actually in arenas, moving away from the Apex a little bit. Yes, they'll probably have one Apex card a month, which still isn't tremendous. I would prefer them to completely move out of the Apex, but one Apex card per month, two fight nights in arenas, and one pay-per-view per month would be something that I would be a fan of uh, for for the UFC. Let's go through it. UFC would plummet if they, yeah. That would not be a good fight. It wouldn't sell well at all. Islam Gaethje. They definitely do need big fights. As I said, if you want big fights, this is what you do. You do Ilya versus Islam. That's a big fight. That's going to sell a ton. Whether or not you think Ilya deserves a title shot, I personally think he does deserve it. I know he was at 145, but I do think you could definitely make the argument that he deserves it. But regardless, from a business perspective, that's a ton of money. Both guys are at the top of their games, and that's a huge fight. And yes, Islam will be a favorite. I'm sure he'll be a minus 250 favorite around. But with that being said, Ilya has a real chance to win that fight. So I think that would be a huge fight. Dricus versus Hamzat's a huge fight. I completely agree. The UFC needs big fights, and those two fights that I just mentioned are going to sell very, very well. Hamzat is going to be a huge star. He already is, but if he wins the belt, he's going to be an even bigger star. And if Dricus is able to beat Hamzat, he's going to catapult his stardom to another level. So I also think that's another fight that they need to make. And nice matchmaking, except for Silva. I appreciate it, bro. And yeah, for Silva, I mean, as I said, I wasn't, the Ortega fight isn't something that I was super confident in, or saying like, oh, this has to be the next fight. I'm more confident in some of my other matchmaking that I did. But the thing for Silva is you can make so many different fights. You really can. Just once again, going through the rankings, Silva wasn't even ranked before the Bryce Mitchell fight, but he just beat Bryce Mitchell, who's at 13. You can do Yusuf Zalal. Listen, I think the UFC is going to catapult him a little bit further. His performance was tremendous against Bryce Mitchell. I think you really fast track him to a title. But theoretically, you could do Yusuf Zalal. That would be a really fun fight between two nice young up-and-comers. As I said, I think Gene Silva wins that fight. But I think you got to push Silva a little bit further than just to 12. So then if you go further than that, you can do Josh Emmett. I also definitely think Gene Silva beats Emmett. But, I would like to catapult him a little bit farther than 10. Yes, you can do Aljamain Sterling. That'd be a really good win for Silva if he could win. Sterling's a tremendous wrestler and has tremendous jiu-jitsu. So that would certainly be the biggest test of Silva's career. But honestly, I think I would lean Silva just because he's so dangerous on the feet, and it would be difficult for Aljo to get the fight to the ground, as Silva proved to have tremendous takedown defense and very fast hips against Bryce Mitchell. So that'd be interesting, but definitely Aljo would definitely be a tougher fight for Gene Silva than Bryce Mitchell was. You can even do Lerone Murphy. I don't think that would be a bad matchup either. Lerone Murphy's movement could be an issue for Gene Silva, but once again, I think I would favor Gene Silva over Lerone Murphy. It's really only takes one big shot to drop Lerone and possibly finish him from there. Arnold Allen, I think you can match him up with. This is a tough fight, I actually think, but I may even lean with Gene Silva. But this is the toughest fight out of the fights that I mentioned. Brian Ortega is the fight that I said. I do lean Gene Silva. Ortega just gets hit way too much. But if he can get the fight to the ground, it could be a little bit of an issue for Silva. Yair Rodriguez, I don't mind that fight, but I think a better fight is Yair versus Diego. Movsar, I think, is fighting for the title. Lopez, as I said, is probably going to be fighting Yair, and Volkanovski is a champ. So, as I said, there's a lot of different matchups you can do for Silva. A lot of them that are fun matchups, and a lot of them that make sense. But yeah, I definitely do think the UFC should push this guy a little bit, fast track him to a title. I think he's that good. I don't say that for everybody, but for Silva, I think he's that good. And a fast track towards a title would definitely make sense. Silva versus Allen makes more sense. Yeah, I don't mind that at all. That would be a good fight. Um, I think Ilya needs to get his feet wet in the lightweight division. Yeah, I mean, yes, I do agree. I do see your point, and actually, originally when Ilya was deciding to move up to 155, I had the same sentiment, and it's not a wrong sentiment at all. I definitely do think he can fight a contender first, and then get a title shot. But there's just such a log jam. If just going through 55, if it's not Ilya next, then it's got to be Armin. And the UFC already said that Armin is not going to fight for the belt next. He's going to need to fight another guy. So then what do you do? Then maybe you do Armin versus Charles, as we said before, but that would mean that whenever that fight gets made, let's say it gets made in June, maybe, and then Islam isn't going to fight again until what, like December, maybe, something like that. So it's just going to be a long time before we see a 155 championship fight. That's the only reason, or not the only reason, but that was a reason why I was thinking you do Ilya versus Islam. Um, but yeah, I mean, yes, they could do Gaethje right away against Islam, but as I said, and as you guys said in the comments, I don't think he deserves it whatsoever. I don't think that's a good fight. Max Holloway, obviously, you can't do that. He just lost. Dustin Poirier is about to retire, and even if he does win in his retirement fight, I don't think you do that. Dan Hooker doesn't deserve it. Michael Chandler definitely doesn't deserve it. And from there, nobody else deserves it. So yeah, I don't know. I really do think you do Ilya versus Islam, but if you want to do Oliveira versus Armin as a number one contender fight, sure. Then the next guy can get the title shot, but then Ilya won't fight for the title for a while. And who do you give Ilya at that point? Do you just give him a Paddy Pimlet at that point? I don't know. There's a lot of work moving parts at 155, and there's interesting things. Let's just go through the comments again. Yeah. Yeah, why risk it? It's the biggest fight. I agree. I almost see Ilya versus Islam similar to a boxing fight where there's two guys that clearly want to fight each other. The promotions want to put that together. But fans or maybe even promotions want these guys to fight a guy before. For a perfect example is this. Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney. People want to see that fight again, the second version of that fight, but both of them are fighting different guys. And obviously, yes, I think both of them are favored, Garcia and Haney. But what if one of them loses? Now you can't put that fight back together. Garcia versus Haney. Maybe you still could, but it would be a lot more difficult to put that fight back together. And then you lose that fight. Now, obviously, Garcia Haney isn't as big as Ilya Islam. It's different sport. It's completely different. I get it. But the point is, when you have fights that are tailor made to be a huge fight, I feel like you just take those opportunities. I don't think you should really wait because obviously anything can happen. Maybe Islam gets injured, maybe Ilya gets injured, maybe Ilya loses, maybe Islam loses, and all of a sudden you don't have that huge fight that you can put together. Um, yeah, let's go through this. Yeah, Islam is leaving lightweight. Yeah, I believe so as well. Um, yeah. Um, Yeah, listen, I agree. I do think that Islam is probably going to leave 155 soon. especially if Bilal loses, which I do think that's going to happen. If Bilal loses at welterweight, I think Islam's moving up to fight JDM. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts at 155 for sure. So let's just go through. Let's go through title fights for every division and what I personally think should happen. I heard Ortega is done with lightweight or featherweight. I wouldn't be surprised. He is very big for 145, and if that's true, obviously you don't make that fight with Gene Silva. Um, but yeah, as I said, for Silva, you can literally match Silva up with anybody between, let's say, 10 and 6. I think that's fair. Anybody in there between 10 and 6, you can match him up with, and it'll be a great fight. And also, I think he'll deserve it. Um, I mean, the Zalal fight, as I mentioned before, would be a really fun one, but I think you got to push him further than the number 12 ranked guy. So yeah. But yeah, going through these weight classes and matchmaking title fights, let's go through it. So for featherweight, the next fight is going to be Pantoja versus Kai Kara France. Now, does Kai Kara France deserve the shot? I mean, probably. Honestly, Pantoja has beaten everybody else, and I believe he also has beaten Kai Kara France um, on the Ultimate Fighter as well. But yeah, he's beaten everybody else. So I guess Kai Kara France will get a shot and probably would deserve it. But in my opinion, what I would do is I would have Pantoja move up to 135 and fight Merab. But I know Merab's fighting Sean O'Malley, which is not deserved. But that's what I would do if I was the UFC and I was Pantoja. I would just move him up to 135, go for that second belt, fight Merab, and that's a amazing fight. Yes, it's probably not going to sell that well with casual fans, but for hardcores, that's just an amazing fight. Um, so so yeah, that's what I would do. But yes, the official fight is probably going to be Pantoja versus KKF. Moving on to bantamweight, yes, it's already made. Merab versus Sean O'Malley. I don't think that's the right fight. As I said, the fight I would make is Pantoja versus Merab. I think you can even do Merab versus Jan. But I'm honestly not as big of a proponent for Merab versus Jan as a lot of other people. The first fight wasn't close at all. And yes, I do think Jan was a little bit injured going into that fight and into that fight as well. And yes, maybe he'll have a better performance in his next fight versus Merab. But with that being said, I just think Jan's a guy that needs to get going. He's gotten better with it. If you watch his last few fights, he does get going a lot earlier. But with that being said, he's not a one-punch knockout guy. And I think that's really what you need to beat a Merab, unless you're a tremendous wrestler and a tremendous cardio. But even then, it'll be tough to beat Merab. So I really don't think Jan beats Merab if they fought 10 times. Maybe he'll win once. I know that's a very unpopular opinion, but I really think Merab is a nightmare matchup for Peter Yan, and I think he beats him most times if they fought, like, let's say 10 times. Um, but um, but what else? So yeah, that's what I would do for 135. For 145, obviously, as I said before, I do Volkanovski, the new champ, against Movsar Evloev. I think that's deserved, and I think that's what will be next. So that's easy. Moving on to 155, as I said, I would do Islam versus Ilya, huge fight. But if you don't want to do that, I think you got to do Arman versus Oliveira, and the winner of that would fight Islam. But yeah, I would do one of those. I definitely would not do Islam versus Gaethje. He does not deserve it, and that would not be great. But we'll see what happens at 155. 170, the fight's already made. It's coming up next month, I believe. Bilal versus JDM. The winner of that should fight Shafkat. If Islam moves up, that will, mess some things up on who fights next. I guess Islam would fight next at that point. But assuming that does not happen, I would do the winner of Bilal and Jack Della versus Shafkat, and then you go from there. For middleweight, it's obviously going to be Dricus versus Hamzat. That's the biggest fight. That's the next fight that will happen, and it's a fight that I think should happen as well. So that's there. For light heavyweight, also obvious, Magomed versus Pereira. Pereira deserves a immediate rematch. He was champ for a while, or a decent amount of time. I don't know why, because he fought so many times in a short period of time, but he has a bunch of title defenses. at light heavyweight. And yes, I do think he deserves an immediate rematch, and that seems to be what they're going to be doing. And at heavyweight, complete mess at heavyweight. Obviously, it should be John Jones versus Tom Aspinall, but Dana's very confident that he can put this fight together. But how long have we been waiting to see this fight happen? And it just hasn't happened. So I don't know. That's what I would do. Obviously, John Jones versus Aspinall. But I listen. If I'm the UFC, I probably would have stripped him already. But obviously, the UFC hasn't stripped John Jones at this point. So probably what I would do is I would give him an ultimatum. Listen, you have to fight Tom Aspinall by, I don't know. Let's say August, and that's being generous probably. Let's say by August you have to have a date signed, or maybe even fight up until that point against Tom Aspinall. If you're not going to fight, you're going to get stripped. And then you do a Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane, maybe, even though Gane really lost his last fight, although they gave him the win against Volkov. But the state of heavyweight is not amazing, honestly. Tom Aspinall is head and shoulders above everybody else. The only guy that's possibly even a fight, in my opinion, for Aspinall is John Jones. But John Jones is getting a little bit older. He is going to be smaller than Tom Aspinall. He's going to be slower than Tom Aspinall. So it's definitely going to be an uphill climb for John Jones. But yeah, although I definitely would favor Aspinall and favor him pretty heavily, I do think John Jones would be the only other guy that would be able to contend with Tom Aspinall. Because when you look through the division, Cyril Gane, he gets taken down and submitted most likely by Tom Aspinall. Volkov, I actually think the same thing. Pavlovich, he already beat Pavlovich. Curtis Blades, he already beat Curtis Blades. Almeida, I think he just tags him on the feet, hurts him on the feet, and finishes him from there. Sergey Spivak, he definitely beats Spivak. Tybura definitely beats Tybura. Derek Lewis, he definitely beats Derek Lewis. Ty, of course, he beats him. Waldo Cortez Acosta, I don't think he's very good. So, yes, Tom Aspinall definitely beats him. Gaziv beats him. Parkin beats him. Teixeira is an interesting fight, but obviously I still think Tom Aspinall would beat him. And Kennedy, I don't think is very good either, honestly. So, yeah, the state of heavyweight is not very good. But we'll see what happens. Fiziev, Bahamondes are in the works for UFC 317. I heard Fiziev is going to be on that fight night card in Bacau. I don't know if it's against Bahamondes. I think I saw that it's against Bahamondes. So we'll see. I'm assuming they're going to want to put him in Bacau for that fight night card, but for UFC 317, that would also be great. But yes, I do believe that fight is happening. But I guess we'll see where it's going to happen. But yes, that's a great fight. Bahamondes has proven, to be a pretty good fighter. And Fiziev has been a really good fighter for a little bit of time. The size differential is going to be pretty big. So that'll be interesting. But we'll see what happens. Almeida versus Tom would be good. Yeah, I mean, I definitely am leaning with Tom. I think on the feet, he just pieces him up. But if the fight does go to the ground, it would be very interesting to see the scrambles, possible submission threats from Almeida, and how Tom would react, especially if he's on his back. But on the feet, I do think Aspinall has a significant advantage in power, speed, and technique. So I definitely would be leaning with Tom in that fight, but that would be an interesting one. But yeah, for women's divisions, let's be honest, do we really care? Probably not. But yeah, so that's matchmaking for this for after UFC 314. As I said, amazing card. Really good. Definitely want the UFC to put on a lot more stacked cards. I do believe they're going to put one on for UFC 317. I believe that's International Fight Week. Not 100% sure, but whenever International Fight Week is, I'm sure they'll stack that card up. Hopefully we get more and more stacked cards, more of these matchups that we want to see. And we'll see what happens going forward from here. But I really appreciate all the boys for joining the live stream. I appreciate all the comments. I really do. I really do appreciate it. I'll be trying to go live a little bit more. I know I haven't been going live all that much. This is just a great card, and I wanted to hop on, talk to the boys, and go through some of the matchmaking that I thought should happen. But anyways, I really appreciate it. Check out any of my new videos if you haven't checked them out already. I got a new video coming out Tuesday or Wednesday maybe about the UFC and how it could be in decline. I mean, obviously it's not, but you know, it's talking about it and improvements that I think the UFC could make. But we'll see what happens. One last comment: UFC through 15 looks garbage. Yes, it does. It does look garbage. They really should look to stack it up a little bit more, but we'll see what happens. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this little live stream, and I'll talk to you boys later. Peace out, guys.